What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Sixers Digest YouTube channel. My name is Sean Barnard, and I am back. It has been a rather somber offseason for the Sixers, but amid the James Harden drama, the lack of draft picks, the lack of cap space, the Sixers still managed to strike gold through the draft with undrafted free agent Terquavion Smith. So I'm ready to break that down, the massive impact that he can have on this franchise moving forward. I want to touch a little bit on who he is as a player, as a person, and why I think this is so crucial for the Sixers moving forward. So let's get right into it. This happened on draft night. The Sixers were without a draft pick, of course, except for the leakage of the draft board, which was the news on draft day for the Sixers. They didn't really do anything. We saw that they were targeting a couple picks to get in. There were a couple rumors connecting them to players, but immediately at the draft's conclusion, there was some breaking news by Shams Charania indicating that the Sixers signed Azuolas Tubelis, Terquavion Smith, and Ricky Council IV, all two-way deals. Now, all these guys we've had a chance to get a look at in Summer League now. There's been some pros and cons with all of them, but I think it is pretty clear that Terquavion Smith is the gem of this bunch. And that should be no surprise. This was a guy that was regarded as a first-round talent last year. Personally, I've watched a lot of Terquavion Smith in college at NC State and have been a fan of his game for 2 years, so I'm very excited that he did land in Philadelphia. He was a guy that last offseason I was going to bat for in the NBA draft season that I thought for sure he was a first-round pick, and that ultimately did not work out. I want to touch a little bit on why that is. So let's jump into his stats here. These are the 2 seasons that he spent at NC State. For starters, we see not that much of a stride forward from year 1 to year 2. He went from 16.3 points per game to 17.9 points per game. There was some growth as a passer, going from 2.1 assists to 4.1 assists. The turnovers didn't inflate that much, which that is an indicator of what the passing, that he had the ball more in his hands, more opportunities to turn the ball over. Seeing it go from 1.7 to 2.2 is not very alarming. Look at the volume of the three-pointers there. 8.1 three-point attempts as a freshman, 8.0 as a sophomore, dropping in percentage, going from 36.9% to just over 33%. We see the efficiency slip overall as well, going from 39.8% to 38%. So we do see the reasons why, that there was a little bit of regression in his efficiency. Terquavion Smith's not a guy that's going to be known for his efficiency. He is a very good shooter, and when you break down the numbers purely on catch-and-shoot opportunities and on corner threes, they look very good, which are extremely positive indicators based on the role that he will be asked to immediately fill if he does get minutes off the bat. So there is some positive signs there. But as a whole, I think the other things that took away is, number one, playing next to Jarkel Joyner at NC State. I like both these guys as players. Jarkel Joyner is a guy who did sign a 2-way deal with the Atlanta Hawks, so another NBA-level talent that he was playing with. I think Joyner and Smith were just a little bit too similar for each other, that they kind of stepped on each other's toes in terms of like what they wanted to do on the court. There was a cool opportunity in Summer League that we got a chance to see these two go head-to-head play against each other, and they were really giving it to each other, talking trash, getting each other's. I don't know what the relationship there, if they are cool and they were just competing on the court, if there is a little beef behind the scenes, but either way, I'm happy that Terquavion Smith is the guy for the Sixers, because I do think he's the better of the talents, and I think that he's going to look better without a Jarkel Joyner alongside him, who plays a relatively similar style of basketball. The other thing is obviously his body. 6'4", only 165 pounds. That's just not an NBA frame. He reminds me a ton of Bones Highland in both the way that he plays and his body type, that he is skinny. I don't think that Terquavion's going to be a guy that puts on weight throughout his NBA time. I think he's always going to be a little bit more slender of frame. That was another critique that stuck to him throughout the draft process, is throughout year 1 to year 2 of college, there really was no improvement in terms of putting on weight to his frame. There's some guys that are just like that they just can't quite put on the weight no matter what they eat, no matter the nutrition. And sure, you can make a little bit of progress. We can be optimistic that there will be steps forward in that regard. But anybody expecting a body transformation, I just don't think is going to be the case for 20-year-old Terquavion Smith. But there are all good vibes for him coming to Philly. Here's a picture of him with Daryl Morey coming to him. And as far as what he brings specifically to this team, what gets me so excited about Terquavion Smith is, for starters, he's a hooper. The Sixers have really fallen victim over the past couple years of drafting to these niche categories or targeting these niche style players. A guy like Matisse Thybulle, who was known for his defense, and that's really all he brought. That the gamble was he would be so elite in this category that it's okay that he's deficient in others. And they even have done the same thing with a guy like PJ Tucker, who really is not an offensive threat at this point in his career, but he is there to do the dirty work, do things, fill in the gaps, do the little things that team needs. That is not Terquavion Smith. Terquavion Smith's a guy that you can drop off at any random blacktop around the country, and he's going to be schooling guys. And I absolutely love that. That's something that they haven't had enough of, that he's a guy that can handle the ball, can create his own shot, can attack off the dribble, can attack closeoffs. He can play make for others. I was very encouraged by the playmaking strides that I saw from him in Summer League. There were a lot of moments where he was trusted as the guy running the show for the Sixers Summer League. And you can't make too many judgments off that. That's essentially street ball out there. All these guys competing for jobs. No real stylistic integrity to the game or plays being called, all those things. But there's still signs of progress as far as him reading the game the right way, making the right decision with the basketball. And I think that he is a question mark as far as a tweener when it comes to point guard and shooting guard. That really shouldn't be that much of an issue with these Sixers, especially because Tyrese Maxey, who, depending on how the James Harden situation shakes out, could very well be the primary point guard for the Sixers this year. Maxey's not a guy who's ever going to be a true point guard either. So I don't think that we're going to be locked in on such a defined role with this Sixers roster no matter where you cut it. And that's where Terquavion Smith comes in. And the other part that I wanted to bring up is just kind of the vibes that he is as a player. And I do think that is important for guys, especially at the end of the roster. That those guys that are hanging on or barely sticking, you want those to be guys that are well-liked around the locker room. Guys that they look at, they're excited to see, they keep morale high. And I wanted to pull up this video of Terquavion Smith at Summer League here. Look at him, first off, shooting the three, getting his reps in, doing all these things here. And then the way he's just dancing around, galloping around, for me is super exciting. And I'm not going to say these Sixers are a team with bad body language or without a ton of vibes, but they can be at times. When you look at a guy like Joel Embiid, who has some bad habits when it comes to hanging his head, his body language not being great. James Harden, the same thing, that when he doesn't have it or he doesn't feel like playing, you can tell. Tyrese Maxey is really the only guy who eclipses that and makes up for that he has this vibe about him, this personality, and Terquavion Smith fits this bill. I mean, this is a guy who he just wears his heart on his sleeve, and at times this is held as a negative thing against him. I personally don't see it this way. There were some critiques about the way he expressed his frustrations throughout his time in college. There was one video going around of him punching a chair in the huddle, things like that. But I just love this raw emotion. I love the personality. I love guys that aren't afraid to wear their hearts on their sleeve in the way that Terquavion Smith is. So I don't expect a huge role for him out of the gate. He is on a two-way deal, which of course means he will be bouncing back and forth between Delaware and Philadelphia. I don't think it should be ruled out that gets converted to a true 15-man roster spot. The big holdup right now is, of course, the James Harden situation, which we will continue to talk about right here on the channel throughout. Depending on what happens with that, there is the potential for a roster spot to be open for Terquavion Smith. He's absolutely going to be the guy first in the pecking order for that. As things currently stand, these Sixers have 14 players on roster, which leaves one open spot. Pretty much any trade I can see going down will end up with these Sixers taking in at least one additional player that they send out, whether it just be a 2-for-1 in a Harden trade or a 3-for-2, whether it's James Harden and PJ Tucker or whoever's attached to the trade to make the financials work. And I don't think that's a bad thing for the Sixers to be taking back more players. Obviously, it's very dependent on who those players are and what the ultimate return is, but I do think it's most likely that it is either a 3-for-2 or 2-for-1, or these Sixers are bringing back more talent, which is why that roster spot is still held open right now. But we still don't know how things are going to go. There very well is a world where Daryl Morey calls the bluff of James Harden and he has to return to camp. And then there still is that open roster spot. We saw these Sixers work with an open roster spot for a good portion of last season for this flexibility, that they're waiting for a potential guy to become available. So Daryl Morey is going to keep the door open there. The bottom line is Terquavion Smith, a two-way deal to get a potential first-round talent as an undrafted guy is a huge deal. And the last point that I want to bring up here is this is a great sign as far as the pathway to growing prospects that really has not been there for the Sixers. The Sixers have done a really bad job of having this direct path that we see from other teams, the good teams around the NBA, like the Miami Heat or the Boston Celtics or even the Toronto Raptors when it comes to developing talent, where you have a guy, you bring him in, you give him a little responsibility and feed to it. It's felt like for the past couple years, and a great portion of this is due to how much turnover there has been when it comes to the front office and coaching, that there's just been a disconnect as far as what the mindset is for growing talent. It finally feels like there's kind of an eye-to-eye mindset between Nick Nurse and Daryl Morey for what it is. All of these guys, Ricky Council the fourth as well, I want to bring up. I'm not as high on him. That I think there's some real legitimate concerns with his shot, and I think that's going to be sink or swim, that I think there needs to be some mechanical adjustments, but he's still the type of swing that you want to take for an undrafted guy on a two-way contract, that he has an NBA frame, NBA athleticism, and he still is a 16-point-per-game scorer at the college level, that we've seen flashes from him. But Terquavion Smith, to me, is very clearly on the pathway that he has these bits and pieces. There is a trust. There's a plan for the type of players that want to be developed. And there's now kind of this growth that can be done where you take an undrafted guy, you give him a two-way contract, you give him a little bit of minutes. Maybe he looks good. You hand him a contract right there. You can sign him to a team-friendly potential 4-year deal in the same way they did with Shake Milton a couple years ago, where that ages as a very nice contract and a guy that can play minutes on your team. And this either turns into a guy who grows into a contributor, or maybe he's a guy that catches the eye of teams around the NBA, and all of a sudden that's a sweetener kind of player that you can toss in a deal. We will see how things go out from that direction, but these Sixers are doing the right thing by bringing Terquavion Smith in this way. I really do believe that he's going to play some minutes for the Sixers this year. I think Sixers fans are going to fall in love with the way that he plays with this passion, his ability as a scorer to create his own shot. He is a guy that can come in and change the game in just a couple minutes by hitting a quick 3 straight threes and taking a guy off a dribble, and all of a sudden he's got 11 points and the game has swung. That's what I expect from Terquavion Smith. I don't count on him to be logging some ridiculous minutes this year, but I do think he's going to grow into a guy who is a long-term piece of the puzzle in the Sixers organization. That's a hat tip to Daryl Morey for getting the job done with very little assets, for finding a diamond in the rough in the undrafted free agent market, and I can't wait to see what he looks like along the real team. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to drop a like on this video, subscribe to this channel, make sure to ring that bell to make sure you're getting all the notifications for us, and me and Casey will be back next time with more right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.